This is Song of Iron. We're here on Xbox Series X taking a look at this interesting limbo-esque sort of experience where you're following this mighty Viking type of character going across a variety of distinct and unique environments. What we're getting here is a 4K resolution, or at least a push towards one at 60, and no HDR support. It's not next-gen optimized or inheriting 1X enhancements. So behind you lies a trail of broken helms, shattered shields. You hold the axe of a fallen foe, worn and dented. It will suit its purpose. And basically, you're trying to find the great temple of the gods to save your people. Along the way, you will get powerful weapons, tools, and meet some dangerous things along the way. This is a story where, basically, I think it's a bit about the love of your life dying, and you're just like, oh no, what's going on? And you have to head to this temple place and talk to the god Thor and meet the other gods and whatnot. At least, that's what your goal is. So the game itself is kind of decently, short, I would say. It's a few hours long to work through with your deaths and everything like that. I guess if you were cutting those all out, it'd be a pretty fast run of the game. But it's still an interesting journey, and definitely one that is quite unique in terms of the art aesthetic, the style of the game, and the experience that it provides. Like mentioned, it is similar to Limbo in terms of it's basically like a running simulator. I know that sounds weird, but it's just one guy just running, because you just run this way. Now, there are some scenes where there's points where you kind of go back and forth and you backtrack a little bit, but a lot of the game is about moving forward in one direction and having a fixed perspective that I think is actually quite cool. The game itself does look really cool. It's moody, it's atmospheric, and for the most part, it does actually run quite well. Now, there are a number of little polishing issues here or there that I would run across. Something didn't work. My achievement for killing the Goblin King didn't count. I was a little mad about that, because I literally killed that guy. I knew exactly who he was. He was taunting me. I killed him. Anyways, moving past that, there was other parts where it's like some things just didn't work as they were supposed to, then reloading the game would kind of get them to work, so little polishing things here or there kind of bog it down a little bit. I also found the checkpoints to be really annoying, and you would have to redo segments, such as like a boss fight. You would have to rehear them talk after you walked up to them and fought enemies to get to them again. And it was just kind of like, it wasn't necessarily hard to do at any point, but it was just kind of tiring to have to redo some areas, a little tedious. So little polishing things, like mentioned, here or there that could have really made this shine, but at the same time, it's really cool. It's got a great sense of atmosphere to it. It's dark, it's gritty, and it's got a neat balance of gameplay. It's got simplistic puzzles, neat combative sequences where you're fighting a variety of different enemies, a neat sci-fi angle to it, again with the whole gods element, and I think it'll definitely surprise folks, as it definitely has some deeper, more surprising elements to it, especially towards the end. You'll be like, huh, I didn't see that coming. There is a bit of a story here that's told through your character's adventures and what you see. It's got some neat little cinematic bits, and it's got some really unique elements to it. It's kind of cool. Like mentioned, you do get some cool powers. You get like a stomping boot. You get the ability to light your sword on fire. You get kind of the ability to run really fast in some circumstances, and you have this like sort of power. So the game is very minimalistic UI-wise. You're not really shown anything, you're not really presented anything. It's a clean picture, but in the bottom left, you have stamina, you have health, you have this power ability, and you use these as you progress. And you shouldn't be getting spoiled for anything, really, because this is just, I think most of this is footage from the beginning of the game, up to like the first boss fight, but right at the beginning of the video was like a little bit later on. But for the most part, it should be a very spoiler-free look at what this is. So you're just kind of like this tough Viking type character that just keeps on moving along the countryside, just fighting things. It does have some neat elements of where it's, again, you're seeing enemies in the forefront, the background, and they kind of like move in on you, which is really cool. It feels like a 3D world, but despite it being a 2D environment, and I think that's really neat. I think they could have taken some elements of it a little further. A lot of like the parkour type challenges are very repetitive in what you're doing, moving past something, swinging, moving on an object that wobbles. I think they could have done something more with those to make them a bit more dynamic or had more of it. It just seems kind of minimal in terms of where they could have pushed things. Now, at the same time, I think for, obviously a developer working on this, a single one, this is very impressive. The music's good. Everything feels good while you're playing it in terms of like just the scale and the impressiveness of just like that individual kind of making this sort of thing. I think it handles well. You can go through it and be like, okay, that was a worthwhile experience. That was interesting. Just keep in mind about like the length of it and the challenge that's presented. It's just very straightforward. You don't get really to adjust many things. You just kind of deal with it as is. There was also times where, I don't know, like I felt like I should know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of like, what exactly does this game want me to do? And I think maybe some of the directions could have been a bit more clear in some areas, because I sat there at times and I was like, what exactly am I supposed to do here? And not every time was like a logical thing where I was like, oh, that was simple. Sometimes I was just like, huh, people might not have noticed that. Or, oh, this actually isn't working as intended and I had to reload things to do it. I'm not saying it's like plagued with issues to any degree. For the most part, everything did run smoothly. You know, you go through it, you run along the countryside, you fight things. There's different like biomes too, which is really cool. You get like the upper sort of regular grass type world with like lots of trees and whatnot. Then there's like the snowy, scary peaks that might have a ferocious winged beast that you have to deal with. Or you might even get a little bit more intense as you kind of match up and meet with the god of thunder. You know, Thor, you've talked to him a few times about your journey. He wants you to join, you know, your brothers in arms, and you're like, I'm not done yet. And he respects that to a degree, and you kind of go on that way. And then also there's these like deep dungeon type areas you have to go to, again with like the Goblin King and other weird ferocious monsters that you have to fight, and I think that's kind of cool. So you do get to visit some neat locations. You do get to go through some unique trials, and I think you'll be very surprised by where it goes. It's quite a journey just in regards to where this character starts and where they end up. I thought that was very, very neatly done, and I did kind of have fun with it. I did feel some things were a little tedious and I got a little tired about some elements, but for the most part, it's pretty cool. It's different. It offers a bit of a challenge, and I think that's kind of a neat experience. And here's a very funny part coming up here. Not necessarily what happens here, but the next chunk of what's going on. It's just kind of fun ending for this video. Anyways, there's neat scenarios where it's always like, you know, you're faced with these challenges, but you're not necessarily always having to fight. You know, the combat's cool though, because you can like you throw a weapon, which, you know, one time I accidentally threw a weapon. I didn't mean to, and I couldn't find it, so I had to fight a bit of the game without having a weapon. I was just like, oh, this is so frustrating. Which is kind of funny. But, you know, you can just kind of pick up weapons from your enemies. You got a bow and arrow. You've got these extra elemental things like the fire on the sword, or like you can do like a lightning arrow. You get these different gifts from the gods, almost, you would call them. And, yeah, it's just kind of neat. And you can, like, roll an attack. You gotta use your stamina well. You gotta be smart about it. It's sort of a slow, subtle burn of fighting and combat. And I thought that was well balanced. But it's not just about fighting foes. You don't always need to attack your enemies. Sometimes you can just sit there and you can, you know, kind of be like, okay, how do I get by this guy? Do I need to fight this guy? It's about being smart and tactical about what you're doing. And sometimes you'll die, and the loading was a little bit slow at times, but, you know, for the most part, it's not too bad. And it's just being, you know, kind of logical. Okay, so how do I tackle this scenario to the best of my ability? You know, how do I deal with this? What is going on here? And it's just kind of neat, because you can, like, literally just, like, some enemies you roll by. Some enemies you can't fight. Some you have to fight. And I think that's very distinct, because you got to be smart about the situations you deal with. Who are you facing off against? Everything like that. I think that was quite cool. I definitely found that to be, you know, very intriguing, and to offer a lot of distinct challenges and, you know, logic-based things. What is the best way to tackle this area? What is the best way to move around here? How do I deal with this scenario? And that's kind of cool. And then you got like a bit of a neat story with the sci-fi angle. I think that's kind of fun how everything gets revealed. So I do think this game has, you know, a fair bit of cool things going for it. You feel like a pretty badass Viking as you progress, and you feel as though you're kind of coming across new unique locations and different trials, and you're always wondering, okay, where are they going next with this? And then things just kind of like blow open, you're like, whoa, things got a little bit crazy all of a sudden. And that's what you're dealing with. And I think that's kind of a interesting experience. So it's kind of, a little bit short, but I think for what it is, it brings decent value. I think you can find a little bit of a challenge with it. I think you can have a good time working through it. As long as you don't get anything spoiled for you, I think you'd have a lot of like, oh, okay, interesting kind of moments throughout. And I think you'll find it to be unique. Again, you're just like running right across the side, but yet it works kind of well for that, and the combat's kind of neat. Oh, the stamina here, or I'm kind of like, why can't I go up this? And then I'm like, oh, you gotta let your stamina bar go up a bit. Anyways, it's kind of funny the mistakes you think afterwards. You're like, oh, okay. There were some, issues here or there. Pausing the game sometimes makes it so you can't really continue playing, so hopefully that gets patched out at some point. But I think it's something different. If you like Limbo and you want something a bit more combative, you might find this neat. If you're looking for something different, this game is definitely a bit strange and wild, and I think it's got some, fun surprises here or there. And it's something distinct. Again, biggest part of that. It's fresh, it's atmospherically quite drawing in terms of what's going on, and yeah, Song of Iron, kind of cool, kind of okay, decently average sort of experience, but yeah, one that you could have some fun with potentially if this does look like your type of game. But just keep in mind, some elements might be a little bit tedious, and you might need a guide here or there to kind of be like, what exactly does this want from me? And I think that this and, kind of a couple smaller things hold it back from being a really great title. It's okay, it's fine, but just, some elements of it I'm like, oh, this could have been a bit better than it was, but still quite an impressive offering considering, the person behind this and stuff. That's really cool. Usually you get like teams, like big teams or groups of folks working on this, a big team, and I gotta say that's kind of impressive.